Hi, everybody. My name is Kate Schroeder. I am the Executive Director for the Hood River County Chamber of Commerce. I have spoken to quite a lot of you guys over the past few weeks, and glad to see your faces here. We decided to do this call today just because I knew that we would do the initial calls to explain what was going on, and then once everything got started that there would be a lot more questions. And so over the last few days I've been getting a lot of questions, and so I just thought that we should have Greg back on and hear answers from the horse's mouth. Thank you for being here. Please continue to ask questions to me. I am in direct contact with Greg, and he has been very, very quick to get back to me. So if you do have questions that I can't answer, I am happy to ask them for you. And if we start to get a lot of questions, then we'll have another call. But again, Hood River County Chamber of Commerce, this is usually a membership benefit, but feel like that this is the right thing to do for the business community, all businesses. But would love, once everybody gets back on their feet, that they would see the value in being a chamber member. And these are the kinds of things that we do for you. We are the voice of business. We are your Hood River County voice of business. And so just want to remind everybody of that. So I will turn it over to Greg and let him get started.
Great.
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rose. We appreciate you guys.
Yes, and I would like to give a little acknowledgement to Rose Mays, who's one of my advisors with the SBDC. I imagine a number of you, if not most, have probably talked with Rose in her capacity with us, and she's been an amazing asset and support to myself, the center, and the community, as you have been, Kate. So thank you for all of your hard work. And just to echo what you said, I know times are tough and we don't have a lot of cash, but it's so important that we're members of our chamber, and they do so much for the community and can do so much for you as a small business. So please remember to do that if you can. So with that, I am going to share my screen here with you all. 1 second. And I'm going to, I'm disabled, Kate.
More.
So just bear with us 1 second. I guess while Kate is figuring that out, I'll give you a little information.
I made you a co-host, Greg. See if that helps.
Okay, let's try it now. There we go.
Okay.
Got it. All right. Okay. So can we see that, Kate?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my name is Gregory Price. I am the director of the Small Business Development Center. What we're going to talk about today is we're going to go through briefly what we do at the SBDC, the federal incentive programs. I know a lot of you know how they work, but I am going to go through them again and then provide some updates that are quite recent. I'm going to go through some of this stuff pretty quickly so I can leave time to field questions. So if there's something I missed, please make sure that you ask.
Hey, Greg, real quick. I just want, if you guys have questions, you can chat them. And then once he gets through everything, then I'll ask Greg the questions and we'll go through them and try to answer whatever he doesn't cover in the presentation. But I'm thinking he's going to cover a lot of things that you have questions about. So hold off for a second, because there's usually a lot of questions and we don't get to all of them, but a lot of them are repeats and stuff that he covers in the presentation. So just try to hold off for a minute.
Great, thank you, yes. We're also going to cover some of the local regional programs that are available, and then some of the, just a couple of the more national ones that are also available. The SBDC is the largest certified business advising network in the state and in the country. We operate as a network out of 19 different centers, 17 of which are based out of community colleges, 2 out of universities. I am based out of the Dalles and Hood River. We represent Gillum, Sherman, Hood, and Wasco, but we also do a lot of work in Klickitat and Skamania. We are advising for-profit businesses. In this circumstance, we are really doing our best to support anybody and everybody that needs it. The primary focus of what we do, or where we spend a lot of our time, is on one-on-one advising. And we support small businesses in all aspects of their business development, from concepts and drafting your business plan to financing and loan packaging to selling your business. We also have a wealth of information, resources, databases, market research team, a capital access team, a global trade center, cybersecurity, franchise network, a lot of different resources that we can leverage to support you. And if we aren't experts in your particular area, it's likely we can find someone who is. We do a lot of community outreach and customized training for our communities and economic development programs, especially in our area where we have a lot of rural communities that need that outreach. The easiest way to reach us, and if you reach out directly to Rose or myself and you are not registered, we're going to ask that you do that first. This is really important to us. This is how we track what we do and how we are accountable to our stakeholders, which is both the federal government, the state of Oregon, and our very important partner at Columbia Gorge Community College that hosts us and supports us in just a myriad of ways. So here's a link to register for our services. It's very quick, very easy. You can also find it on our website at bizcenter.org. So start there, and we are very, very responsive and get back to you very quickly. So the first program, the federal program I'm going to talk about, is through the SBA. It's the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. I will refer to it as the EIDL loan from here on out. This opened quite a while ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago. It has been streamlined 3 times, and now it's in its final iteration. There's only one place to apply for this, and that is online. And that is through their portal. It's a very simplified, easy application. If you have not done the simplified, easy online application and you applied to one of their earlier iterations, they are recommending that you go back and do it through the streamlined process. Just so it's, because they don't want to review the older applications that they had submitted because they were significantly more complicated. When you apply, they're going to ask for some basic information, some income and revenue information. They'll also ask for your tax identification number, your employee identification number, your social security, and your bank account information. And that might feel kind of weird providing that, but they need that to verify who you are, your business, and to have a way to direct deposit the funds when they become available. They will ask at the end of that application if you want to be eligible for a up to $10,000 grant. This is, they're actually calling it an advance. It is in all purposes a grant, but one of the things that has changed recently that's pretty important is that now the SBA is stating that you will only get $1,000 if you are a sole proprietor, self-employed, a contractor, or really, unless you don't have any employees. That's what you're going to get, is $1,000 at the most. And you are not even guaranteed that. But hopefully you will get that. If you do have employees, you are eligible for $1,000 per employee up to 10 employees. So again, a $10,000 cap. And as I stated earlier, this is not guaranteed that you will get this grant. This is ultimately a loan program. The idea behind that grant is to get that money out to you as quickly as possible and to have it be very flexible. The idea behind switching this from $10,000 to anybody who applied to $1,000 per employee, is to try and create some equity to those who are applying. So those with more staff and a little larger businesses had a little more revenue to support their operations. We certainly recognize that there is a gap in a lot of these incentives for those who don't have employees, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Just about anybody can apply for this besides public nonprofits and farms and those who are employed full-time. You do have to be in operation from January 31st of this year. Another thing that has changed is it's only 1 year of deferment, principal and interest, not 4 years. The term is up to 30 years. It can be 15, depending on the size of the loan. There's no pre-payoff penalties, so you can buy this loan down whenever you want. It is up to $2 million at 3 3/4 for-profit, 2 3/4 nonprofit. There's no collateral, no personal guarantee required for loans under $200,000. And basically how they're going to calculate this is by looking at your gross revenue for the last year and dividing it by half. If that total comes up to less than $500,000, that's basically what you're going to get is 500. If your gross revenue is over $1 million, and that loan therefore would be over $500,000, they have their own calculation in figuring out what you may be eligible for. They are stating now that it will be 3 to 5 weeks before funding through this loan program becomes available. And that may be optimistic, we don't know. They are hoping to release the grant funds sooner than that. And that's part of the reason why it's set up as a grant, so they can release it. It's no strings attached. They don't need to monitor or evaluate it. They just need to release those funds. You will not hear back from the SBA right away. You will not hear back from them until those 3 or 5 weeks come and your loan officer is available and has processed your loan and is ready to reach out to you. There's really no avenue to check up on it, to check the status. They do have a hotline. They do have a phone number and an email address, but it's one number, one email address for the entire nation. So I would not expect a very quick response. And I'd also urge you to not flood those lines unless you really need to, because it just slows down the process, and just urge you for some patience. And I know that's really difficult right now. This funding is pretty flexible. It can be used for payroll, fixed costs, utilities, etc., but it cannot be used for long-term debt. It cannot be used to consolidate other loans. And this application ends at the end of the year, but it's likely the funds will run out before then. So we're really urging people to apply right away if you have not already. The Paycheck Protection Program, this opened April 3rd. I'm going to be referring to it as the PPP moving forward. It is, this is also a federal loan program. It is a federally guaranteed loan that is going to be administered through local lenders. The lenders need to be SBA certified, but you will apply directly through them. Same eligibility list for the most part. They are making conditions and special eligibility for farms, food service sectors, and franchises. So it's even more people who can apply to this. It is a loan forgiveness program up to $10 million in loans. And how they're gonna calculate that, your loan amount, is by looking at the last 12 months, and that can be the calendar year of 2019, or it can be the last 12 months from today's date. You just need to show how you're calculating those 12 months. And you will divide that by 12 to get your monthly average and multiply it by 2.5. And that in essence is gonna be your loan amount. And that includes salary, wages, commissions, tips, medical and sick leave, payments for group healthcare benefits, insurance premiums, retirement benefits, state and local tax assessed on compensation. For those who are sole proprietors, contractors, or self-employed, it is going to be your net earnings capped at $100,000. So that is basically what they're going to be looking at, and it's going to be so a little bit of a different calculation there. There's been some questions as to whether you can apply for this if you don't have employees. Yes, you can apply for this. And there's some excluded costs. Again, anybody with an annual salary of $1,000 in excess, it's capped at that. It can be prorated through February 15th to June 30th if necessary. Some payroll taxes, railroad, retirement taxes, income taxes are excluded, and any compensation of employees whose principal places outside of the US. Also, and this is something that's going to come up a number of times, is that, for example, here, the qualified sick leave wages, the credit that is allowed for that under 7001 and 7003, you cannot take those if you were taking PPP. And there's going to be a number of those tax incentives that you can't leverage if you're taking this program. So I will go through some more of those, but really make sure that you are in communication with your CPA, with your tax advisor, and know which of these apply to you, and know that you can be taking advantage of a lot of these, especially for those who aren't benefiting much from the PPP directly. So how much of this is going to be forgiven? They're going to look at all of those payroll costs. You'll look at the interest on mortgage obligations that are incurred during the ordinary course of business, your rent on leasing agreements, and your payment on utilities, electric, gas, water, transportation is also included, telephone and internet. Those costs, the rent and those utilities are not included if you are a home-based business. So that's an important caveat there. They're not going to pay or include your home mortgage or rent payment there. For everybody else, you will include those costs for that 8-week period after the origination of the loan. So once that loan comes into effect, you'll track all of those expenses for 8 weeks. And whatever that total is, that's what you will deduct from that 2.5-month payroll cost we calculated earlier. That's how much is going to be forgiven. And it can be up to 100% of the loan. A couple important things that there's been some confusion on is that only 25% of this loan can be used for approved costs outside of the payroll. It doesn't need to be in that 8-week period. It can be whenever you want it, whenever you need it. It can be 6 months from now. It can be 2 years from now. So you don't need to use the loan money right away. It's just that 8-week period that the forgiveness amount is calculated. But the total of that amount, only 25% of it can be used for those costs that are approved outside of payroll. The other really important thing is the amount of the loan forgiven is going to be reduced if there's a reduction in the amount of employees that you bring back on relative to your historical average or your average of the last year. And that's going to be a proportional reduction. So if 80% of your employees are brought back on, only 80% of that amount forgiven is going to be forgiven. And it's a similar calculation if they come back on with reduced wages, less than 75% of their normal wage. You will also be proportionally reduced in the amount that's forgiven. But you do have until June 30th to bring your employees back on. So there's a little bit of strategy that needs to be considered there in terms of when you bring your employees back, because ultimately you want to capture as much of those expenses in the 8 weeks after origination, so you're getting the maximum amount of your loan forgiven. But of course, we might not always know what our operations are going to look like right away. So one of the benefits in this having to wait is that it's likely the longer you wait for that origination date, the more of those costs you're going to be able to capture and still have value of those employees coming back in terms of your operations. So just kind of keep that in mind. And it might even be worth, if you're able to, have a conversation with your lender about that origination date and how it might impact when the forgiveness is calculated and what makes most sense for your business. It's going to be the bank's prerogative as to whether there's flexibility there or not. There's a 1% interest rate, and there's 6 months deferral on principal, but not interest. That starts right away. But that interest can be forgiven. So ultimately, it shouldn't matter much. And even at 1%, it won't be a lot of money. The loan is due in 2 years in full. Again, you have to apply with local SBA certified lenders, and we do have a fair amount of those. Some people have been concerned because they heard Wells Fargo stop taking applications, and maybe their other banks might. And it is your bank's prerogative in terms of what they want to process. But Wells Fargo was capped because of their bad behavior in the market years ago. And so this is a restriction that's been placed on them by the federal government. It's not an internal thing, and other banks don't necessarily have that quota that they do. So that's just kind of a heads up. It's in the bank's best interest financially to process as many of these loans as they possibly can. That's where they make their money, is primarily on the origination fee. And this 1% does certainly add up, but it's really that origination fee, and there's no risk for them in doing this. Very, very little. The federal government is really carrying all the risk. So again, they are really trying to process as much as they can. A couple things to keep in mind about our local lenders is that they had to create the infrastructure from the ground up as soon as they knew this was coming online. And in addition to that, it has been changing for us, as it has been changing even more for them on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis. And these banks are literally working 24 hours a day to support us, to get these applications in, and to process as quickly as possible. So I wanted to give you a little bit of insight that might help you as well as the banks in applying for this, in some of the things you can do and keep your eye out for. One is just making sure that you are putting in the correct information. You have your complete address, your personal address, your business address, your TIN. You also need to provide disclosure for all owners, 20% or more. This is mandated by the SBA. And in addition, if you have, say, a C Corp where you have a ton of owners that all are, maybe you have 30 owners that are under 10% or less or whatever, then you need to provide at least 50% of the ownership in terms of disclosing their information, and everybody over 20%. I know that's a little confusing, but so if you don't have any owners over 20%, again, you need to provide enough of them to add up to at least 50%. Make sure that you're providing complete submission of all the documents, your IRS Form 940, all quarterlies, your payroll ledgers, and they want to see those broken out in payroll costs per employee. This is something that is really helpful for them. And if you are providing this stuff in advance, it really eliminates a lot of the bottlenecking that's going on, both for them and for you. The less times they have to come back and ask you for more information, the better off you're going to be. One thing that people have asked is, my bank isn't a certified lender, or my bank is not taking applications, or for whatever reason I can't apply. Can I apply with other lenders that I don't have a current relationship with? And the answer is absolutely yes, you can. That process is likely going to be slower for you because you do have to create that relationship in essence and open a business account, and you have to provide your entity of origination, your articles of incorporation, all of those things that you would do in normally opening up your business account so they can establish you and verify your business. You might get put at the back of the line behind their existing business account holders. That's, again, the bank's prerogative. But again, it doesn't eliminate you from applying somewhere else. And so how this is really working in terms of the process flow for the banks. And keep in mind, this is KeyBank's specific process, but this really is how it is working for most lenders. This is in essence kind of the standard how most, especially larger national banks, are doing this. So you identify, they identify the client's needs. Often you will receive an email from them with a link to register, but also a lot of banks now are providing existing portals into your business account. So you go to your online business account, and often there's already a portal there for you. Or there might be a link on the bank's main landing page. They are trying to automate this as much as they absolutely can. So you can go to your bank account, and there's likely going to be a tab there, and under that tab it'll say COVID-19 or Paycheck Protection Program, and there'll be the application process there for you, and it'll tell you all the things that you need to apply, that you need to upload all of those documents into. You might, in other branches, you might need to apply through the small business origination through the branch, may send you a link again for that. It'll vary from branch to branch or bank to bank, but this is generally how it's going to look. Once you complete that application, you upload all of those documents, and it's pretty much just going to be a drag and drop thing. Then that information will then go to the underwriters at that bank. And again, this is why it's so important that your application is complete, because the underwriter has to review your entire application, go through it, verify it, do all the calculations, and approve it. If there's one thing missing, it gets sent back. They have to request that information, and you start in the queue again. And it has to go through that review process all again. So again, that's just really important to do. So once it's reviewed and it's approved, then that gets sent by a protected transfer to the SBA. The SBA also has to review this application, and then it's out of the bank's hands in terms of how long that takes. To give you an idea, the SBA right now is processing about $2 to $3 billion an hour in loans. It's outrageous and unprecedented. And they're really putting all of their attention into that. Once it is approved by the SBA, the closing docs are prepared by the local lenders. That's sent for you to sign, and in most cases, and you can sign them online with a DocuSign of some sort, and then you give it back to the bank, and you're ready for funding. In some cases, we have seen some applications turn around and get funding in a matter of just over a week. Again, if you're complete, and depending on your bank, that might be probable for you. For other banks, it might take 2 or 3 weeks. So again, same thing with the SBA, but even more so with your local bank. Please be patient with them, know how hard they're working, and know that all of those email requests and those phone calls, slow them down. So unless it's really urgent, I would urge you to hold back on that. If we can support you, please allow us to. Of course, if you really need to, they are there to support you. But those little things do bog the system down quite a bit. So I hope that helps with a little bit of the process for the PPP. A couple of the other things that are available is the Small Business Debt Relief Program. This is also through the SBA. This is for existing loan holders with SBA loans. So if you have a 7A, a 504, or micro loans, these are, the SBA is covering payments, including principal, interest, and fees for 6 months on all note holders. You don't need to apply, you don't need to contact them, you just don't make the payment, and they will make it for you for 6 months. So that's fantastic. In addition to that, if you are currently in the process of getting an SBA loan, you can also have 6 months of loan payment provided by the SBA if your loan is processed and originated within 6 months of February 15th. So it's also a great program if you're still in that process. And yes, that process can still move forward despite these other programs. They're from separate pots of money. So keep moving forward with that if that's where you're at. So there's also the Employee Retention Tax Credit. This is changed significantly. It's equal to 50% of qualified wages with respect to each employee, and qualified wages cannot exceed $10,000 per employee per calendar year. So that can be really valuable. The one thing with these, and I'm not going to go over it in detail, but if you were taking the PPP, again, you aren't eligible for this tax credit. So just bear that in mind. And actually, a couple of things I didn't mention. One, if you apply for the EIDL loan, you can apply for the PPP. If you apply for the PPP, you can apply for the EIDL loan. They're not mutually exclusive, and they can play together. There's a couple caveats. If you get that grant, whether it's $1,000 or $10,000, that amount is going to be deducted from the amount forgiven from your PPP. The other thing that's very important is if you get them both, they need to be used for separate things. So that PPP needs to be used for your payroll. Of course, you can use 25% of it for those other approved costs, but you cannot use the EIDL loan for your payroll. And if you're using that 25% for those other costs, you need to use the EIDL loan for other expenses. Remember, the EIDL loan is very flexible, so you can use it for other things, as long as it's not long-term debt. If you do use the EIDL loan for payroll or for the same expenses you're using your PPP, you will be obligated to refinance the EIDL loan into the PPP loan, and basically bundling that into one package and one loan. So just bear that in mind. One of the things that we've been recommending, and some banks are too, is create separate accounts for each loan. So you have one for your EIDL loan, you have one for your PPP, so it's easier to keep track of where those funds are and what you're spending them on. There's also delay of payroll taxes. There's a deferment on this for payroll taxes for the remainder of 2020, with 50% due on December 31st, 2021, the other 50 due on December 31st, 2022. Eligible deferral period begins March 27th and will actually extend through January 1st, 2021. Again, if you're taking the PPP, you're not allowed to defer this. There's also modification to net operating losses. So for C Corps, this can be really valuable. You are now allowed to carry this backwards 5 years. Again, if this is applicable to you, I really recommend that you talk to your CPA or your tax advisor about how this is something you can leverage. As you probably know, we've also had the extension for filing taxes, as well as the deferment, as I mentioned. This has now also been matched by the state, so that's great, especially when it comes to filing. It doesn't make sense to do one and not the other usually. So that's something that if you need that extra time to focus on these loans, it can really come in handy right now. But one of the unfortunate side effects is we're finding a lot of people need to finish this stuff to get some of the information they need to fill out the loan. So I get it's a little bit of a catch-22 there. Some of the other federal incentives is there a modification on limitation of losses for sole proprietors and pass-throughs. There's an increase to interest deduction from 30% to 50%. And this is both 2019 and 2020. And there's a technical amendment to qualified improvement property. Some of the regional programs that I want to make you all aware of is the Mid-Columbia Economic Development District. They are offering a $15,000 bridge loan. So if you need operating capital in a hurry, they can provide this. They do want to see that you have applied for whatever federal programs you're eligible for or that makes sense for you. They're also offering 2 months of deferral on existing note holders. They also administer money for the Oregon Investment Board, and that loan is up to $35,000, and they're offering 3 months deferral for existing note holders. It's at 4 3/4, and again, this is a last option loan. For those who may be in Skamania County, they're offering something similar with a $40,000 loan. They have that loan is specifically for those within the Scenic Gorge area, as is the McKed loan, but not the OIB. They do have funding through the Washington Investment Board that they can leverage, but it's only $25,000 for those in that region outside of the Scenic Gorge. It's a 3-year. Interest rates do vary depending on risk. They are saying that it is around 6% on average. It's for most legal ventures. They are requiring some personal guarantee. Usually property is what they're looking for. They do have a simplified application there. Also, Washington State is now offering a small business grant for those of you who might be on the other side of the river. It's something that you can work with your chambers to apply for. It's a very, very competitive loan. I would urge you to apply as soon as you can. It's capped at $10,000. They're really suggesting that instead of just asking for the maximum, ask for what you really, really need, and you might be more likely to get it. But again, I think King County saw 5,000 applicants in the first day, and they can only approve 200. Gillum County has a small business stabilization grant. This is for-profit businesses, home-based businesses, and nonprofits. It is a pretty flexible pot of money. It's intended for bridge funding for those who have demonstrated financial hardship. They do want to see that you've applied for federal support as well. Right now, they're still taking applications, and there still is money in that pot. So I really would recommend, if you qualify, there's no reason why you should not be applying for that pot of money. A couple others from Business Oregon. I'm not going to go through these in specific, but there is a link to all of these. They are streamlining these processes to get some of this capital available through these different programs, because they have conventionally been a bit cumbersome to work through. But again, they're making a lot of efforts to make this more available and easy to access. So if you qualify for some of these micro enterprise startup loans, R&D prototype, scalable, things like that, please contact Business Oregon. And they are working on other programs as well to make available to all of us. Workshare, if this is a really great program, most states have the same thing. It might be called something different. It's shared work in Washington. This can be a really great tool for this interim period where you are still in operations. You might need some support, but not all your staff. This allows you to keep them on full time, but not pay them full time. And the state, through the unemployment department, will reimburse you from anywhere between 20 and 40% of those wages. They do have to qualify for unemployment. They cannot have exhausted those benefits. But I think that this could be really beneficial for those, especially while you're waiting for your PPP or other funding to become available. So you do have to have at least 3 people covered under this, but I have provided the link for this if you want to look into it. Some other programs and incentives, one that I think very few people know of, that I think is just a fantastic resource, is the Small Business Legal Clinic. This is through the Lewis and Clark School of Law. It is a grant subsidized program. You can get up to 10 hours. And Judy, I see you taking a picture. You'll have access to all of this presentation and a link to apply. So 10 hours of professional legal counsel for only $25. That's not $25 an hour, that's $25. And it really just covers the application fee. You get the same case manager for your entire case. So you're not having to bring anybody up to speed every time you talk with them. The one caveat is you must be at 50% medium high income for the state of Oregon. And I believe that's about $62,000. So it's just north of about $40,000, I believe. So it is for those who financially need it. They do not provide litigation service. They do provide service in Spanish, which is fantastic. And I believe the wait time to scheduling, last I talked to them, was only 1 week. So this is a service you can take advantage of really quickly. And I think there's a lot of benefit that you could have here. This is only available to rural Oregon businesses. So it's really an opportunity catered and targeted just for us. So, and they're looking to take on clients. There's the Restaurant Employee Relief Fund. This has been a privately funded program through some celebrity chefs and others. And it's a $500 one-time grant to restaurant employees. It is first come, first serve. Applications opened April 6th. I don't know if there's still money in that pot. I would be surprised if there is, but I wanted to put it out there. No harm in applying. There's a link to the application in this presentation. Verizon Small Business Recovery Fund, they're offering $5 million. They're in their second round of applications. I just heard Miller Beer also has about a $5 million program for restaurant employees. I don't know much about that, but if you are in that category, worth looking into. So here are all the links. They're all here for pretty much everything I went through. I will make this available to Kate, and she will get it to you as soon as she is able. So with that, I will pass it back to Kate.
Okay, thank you. We will start to go through some of these questions. Are cannabis businesses eligible for any loan or benefits under this program?
No.
Okay.
And one of the other things is that's been recognized is a lot of undocumented citizens are not covered or supported in these programs. The USDA does have resources available for undocumented citizens and workers. I don't know a whole lot more beyond that. I do have a link I can share with you, Kate, if you don't have that. Um, and you can look a little more there if it's helpful for those who might need it.
I was on a call today that the Congress is, talking about approving another $251 billion for the Paycheck Protection
Yes.
Program. It seems like it's happening. It was stalled very little, but they believe that that's going to go through in the next few days because funding is probably going to run out for that program.
Oh, there's no doubt it's going to run out well before the application deadline. And whether it's 251, whether it's 200 or whatever, it will be refunded to some extent. And one of the things that we have certainly recognized is that a lot of micro enterprises, so 50 employees or less, or self-employed contractors, etc., are falling through the gaps in a lot of these incentive programs, where the best thing they can really do in a lot of cases is take on more debt. And that's just not sustainable. So right now, there's not a lot of solutions out there. I know there were some of the grant programs I mentioned, but I do just want you to know that that's something we're very aware of. We're working on hard with our economic resilience team or our response team, with our senators and our legislators. They're well aware of it. And we're really working hard to make sure that there's provisions allocated and a carve out or a special program. We're not sure what it looks like yet, specifically for people in that category.
There were two questions. So you had mentioned in the very beginning that people might have to reapply if they applied early. What was the date? Was it the March 31st?
Maybe. I don't know, Rose, if you have that question, chime in, or that answer.
Yeah, you know what, Greg, I just posted that. It was March 29th is when we started getting notification that they weren't accepting the second application.
Great.
So if you did it, I would say March 30th, you're going to be fine. And if there's a question, we can give you the link of the new application. And as soon as you go into it, you will know if you applied for the right, on the right link or not.
Yeah. If you had to drag and drop or upload any documents, then you need to reapply. Because the new application doesn't require any of that. It's basically 3 pages. You qualify on the first page, provide a couple information, on the second page and third page, and that's it. So if that doesn't sound familiar, then reapply, and we'll get you the link to do that. It's also in this presentation as well, the link to that application.
Greg, just an FYI, I've been private messengering you. I have been answering some of these as we go because I know we're on a time restraint.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you, Rose.
You're welcome.
Okay, so then when I read them, Rose, you can just tell me whether you've answered them or not.
Okay.
There was a question about, I'm assuming the PPP, is that for just full-time employees or part-time employees? It doesn't matter, right? It's just your total payroll cost.
Yeah. They're going to look at your average again. So they're going to look at your total expenses for full-time and part-time, and you're going to get the average of those. And that's same for seasonal workers. There is a different calculation for seasonal businesses. I think the dates are, you can basically take this last quarter and get your average off of that if that's your seasonality. So they are trying to make provisions for that as well, recognizing that there's a lot of businesses, especially in agriculture and tourism, that are.
I have 1 full-time salary employee and 12 part-time 1099 contractor employees. Do the 1099 employees count?
No, they need to be on your payroll.
Okay.
Or salaried, or, in case of, if you are a contractor, those contractors can apply themselves.
Right.
So they need to be applying. And so if you're in discussion with them, might be nice to let them know that they are applicable, but they're not part of your payroll, so you can't include them.
And they can apply tomorrow, right? The 10th?
Yes, thank you. Yes, that's,
okay.
And just some caution in that, is that's when it opens. And when the SBA is providing all the provisions for the banks, um, in terms of clarification on the lending process, but banks have their own prerogative in terms of their own lending process and timelines. So if you go to them and they say, well, we can't take them yet, just stay in communication, and it might take them a couple extra days to get online.
How about liability insurance for non-payroll PPP costs? Can it be covered?
No, I don't believe it can.
Okay. Advised today by SBA lender that funds must be deposited within 10 days of approval. Is this correct?
That's news to me. I would love to get further verification on that. So if that is the case, we can advise people to that effect. But that's the first I've heard of that.
So no home-based business costs can be calculated, correct? And why not?
Because they're your personal costs as well, really. And I can't go through the entire SBA justifications, but really they don't want to be paying your mortgage for your home mortgage, because those are expenses you would be covering normally. And they're not entirely business related.
Okay, PPP loan. Can I pay employees their pre-COVID closure wages using the PPP loan funds, even if we are still closed and they are not working the same hours as pre-COVID closure? Is that correct?
Yes, and that's your prerogative. If you might want to reach out to us if you need some strategy in determining what might make the most sense, or working with your lenders to extend that origination date if they're able to do that. That way you're not bringing on your staff who's just going to be standing around not doing anything, because we know we're still going to be in this situation for a little while longer. Again, I'm not telling you that your banks can or will do that, but it's worth having a conversation to see if they will, because that could make a big difference in getting those costs covered with your employees actually there and having work to do. But yes, that is correct. You can bring them on and they can sit around and do nothing if that's the case, which I know doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's how it is.
For the PPP, do you have to get the maximum amount of the loan, or can you ask for less?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know that I've heard that. I would imagine you can get less. That's something you would have to discuss with your local lender. I can't imagine that they're going to ask you to take more money than you want. I've never heard of a lender doing that, so I don't think so. And if you do get all of it, you can just pay it right back. So again, there's no pre-payoff penalty. So if for whatever reason, and here, let me give you a scenario why your bank might say no. The bank, they get their money on origination fees, and that origination fee is proportional to the loan amount. And so the larger loan that they get from you, the more money they make. And that money, again, comes from the federal government. It's not coming out of your pocket. So it's in their best interest to give you the biggest loan they can. And so they might say, well, no, this is the calculation. This is what we're going to give you. And that's fine. That supports the bank. And you can, again, once you get that money, just, give it back. But again, I would do that calculation of what is going to be forgiven. And if there is any in excess, then give that back if you want to. But just keep in mind, it's at 1% for 2 years. It's the cheapest money you're going to get anywhere else. And if it was my business, I would keep that in a bank account and hang on to it for that 2 years in case something else comes up, knowing that I'll have it available for hard times or in a case of emergency, and I don't have to go through the process again. And it just would provide a little more security. So I would advise taking the full loan.
Okay, thanks, Doug. Wells Fargo asset cap was lifted and is accepting interest today.
Great. Yeah, I knew that they were making a very strong case for that with the federal government. I'm not sure if the cap is fully lifted or if they just now have a little more quota, but that's good news for Wells Fargo clients. But it
Yeah, it is.
certainly, I think, reiterates the fact that it is important with who you borrow money from and who you bank with.
Yeah. How should a borrower account for federal taxes when determining its payroll costs for purposes of the maximum loan amount, allowable uses of a PPP loan, and the amount of a loan that may be forgiven?
I don't know if I really follow that entirely, but really it's what they're going to be doing is looking at all costs incurred within that 8 weeks. So even, let's say, for example, you are paying payroll, your loan originates on the 10th and you pay payroll on the 15th, but it's for the last month. That payroll, that entire payroll will be covered because you have incurred that cost on the 15th, even though it's for time and other things previously. It's at the date that that expense incurs. So if those taxes are incurred within that 8 weeks, then they will be covered in the PPP. And again, you're not allowed to defer them if you're taking the PPP. So you're going to have to pay them anyway. It might not be in that 8 week period. Well, it should be. It depends on the origination date. Excuse me. So I don't know if that fully answers the question, but I hope so.
Maddie, does that answer your question?
This is directly from the facts document that you sent, the question.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have your payroll costs, it sounds like you do not take out the federal taxes or the FICA from those costs when you're doing your calculations. I just wanted to clarify that. And what about Oregon state taxes? Would I remove those from the payroll costs, the gross, in order to get my calculation for PPE?
Yeah, let's go back here.
Question number 16 on that government fact document that you sent out, Kate?
Yeah, the one that came from the
Right. So the costs that you can include again are the costs that are excluded are payroll taxes, railroad retirement tax, and income tax. So those are excluded from, and I'm assuming that's state and federal. I don't.
State and federal. It says federal here on the answer. But.
Right, and to be honest, I don't think the state has provided guidelines on that.
Okay.
Then, so one thing that you can do, Matt, to cover your bases on that is just really document everything. Make sure that you're really showing how you're coming up with those expenses. And again, the bank is going to do this as well with you. They're going to go through those expenses as well and sign off on them.
Yeah.
And so if those are included and the bank signs off on them, you're going to be pretty safe from a liability standpoint in that respect. And the worst case scenario is you might have to pay that small portion back.
Yeah.
But given that there isn't any guidance on that, I don't know why you wouldn't include them.
Okay, so I'm going to say on my documentation, I did not subtract from my gross income taxes, payroll taxes, federal and state. I'll just write that.
That I think that would be a smart thing to do.
And just not remove it in doing my calculations.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Okay. Do you need to wait until you receive funds from the EIDL before you can apply for the PPP?
No.
Already answered those.
And the banks are not, from all the banks I have talked about to, they're not even considering the EIDL loan in terms of your debt to income ratio or your eligibility for the PPP and how it might affect, because again, they're not requiring personal security on any of these and very little to no collateral in some cases. So for them, there's no risk. So they're not worried about those conventional things you might be worried about in a loan. Because again, it's federally backed and they're getting their money off the origination. So they're not worried too much beyond that.
So apply. Yeah. What is the best avenue for me to apply to pay lease payments while my business is not operating at full capacity?
The idle loan, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I get that it's going to take a while for those funds. If you need money quickly or more urgently, and your local lenders aren't able to support you in that, go to MCED and let them know what you've done, that you have applied already. Your local lender is bogged down and can't get you. They will do everything they can to process a bridge loan as quickly as they possibly can to help you cover that gap.
Okay. How do you show payroll cost if you are the sole proprietor? What if we do not write ourselves a check and just pay expenses from profit?
It's a really great question. And really what that looks like is you're going to be taking all of your income and you're going to minus or deduct any of your costs of goods sold, any of your expenses, anything to that effect. And that balance, in essence, is your income. It's your payroll. That's what you take home, and you cap it at $100,000. So that's what you would use to calculate that.
What if your employees are independent contractors, not employees? What legal information do I need to submit?
Well, they're just not covered. So
yeah.
So
they need to apply on their own.
Yeah, you can use the idle loan to pay for independent contractors if it's in the normal course of your business in supporting your operations, but you can't leverage them under the PPP.
Okay. Do my employees have to come off unemployment benefits if my business is granted the PPP loan, even if I can't bring them back right away?
Well, they don't have to, but if you are going to pay them, absolutely. They can't get a paycheck from you and collect unemployment at the same time. And, that's one of the reasons the Paycheck Protection Program exists, is to get people back to work and to get them off unemployment. And a couple questions have come up to us earlier is that, well, what if I offer them the job and they don't want to come back because they'd rather stay unemployed? Well, that's not legal. They will lose their unemployment, and you need to document that. So don't do it in a phone call. Do it in an email, and make sure that you have documentation of all of that and that you can provide that verification with the unemployment, because it is not okay for them to deny unemployment or deny work and stay on unemployment unless they have a valid reason, they're sick or whatever that extenuating circumstance might be.
So they can't be on unemployment and you offer them their job back and decide to just stay on unemployment?
They can't, no.
Okay.
No, absolutely not.
That's been a lot of questions on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, the point of unemployment is not for you to stay on unemployment. It's right. To care until you can work again. And if your employer, and most of this is temporary unemployment, they're not firing you. It's a temporary layoff. And so you need to go back to work when you are able to. And unless you can verify that, you can't, you have to. And you as an employer have the responsibility of tracking that and making sure you are communicating with the unemployment department if that is indeed the case.
Hang on. Hi. Oh, wait.
Okay.
Sorry, go. Yeah.
To clarify, there's no work for them to do. I'm the one that asked that question. There's no work for them to do because we're an unnecessary business and we're closed at the storefront. So that's why I'm asking, can they stay on unemployment and I get the PPP at least to pay for myself and my partner and slowly bring the business back up and slowly bring them on?
Yeah.
Clarification.
I get it. Yes, absolutely. You don't have to bring them on. Okay. The one thing is to consider is they're not going to be included in that amount that's going to be deducted from what's forgiven. So, because that comes from 8 weeks from origination. So again, Erica, one of the things I would suggest for you is to have this conversation with your bank and let them know, hey, it makes no sense for me to bring people back on my payroll right now because there's no work for them to do. Can I extend that origination date out to capture those expenses when I'm actually incurring them and need them? And again, it's up to them whether they say yes or no. And I would really, and I'm sure Kate would too, love to hear the answer you get from them and if they do accept that or not and their reasoning.
Yeah, that would be good to know because I'm sure a lot of people have that same question.
Yes.
We're closed.
Absolutely.
I don't have anything for anybody to do. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. Checking for an update on this point. Is it still either EIDL or PPP? No combination of programs.
You can apply to both. Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there was some confusion. I've been asked that quite a lot. Like a lot of people think you can apply for both.
I think the big confusion there is that you can't use the expenses or the loan for the same thing. So you can apply to them both, but you just can't again use that money for the same expenses. You have to keep them separate. You have to use the EIDL loan for whatever operating costs and the payroll protection money for your payroll and those other approved expenses. Again, if you use the EIDL loan for those, for your payroll, you will have to refinance.
Okay. And then I posted just a link of where you could find this because you guys probably will have questions and want to go back and look at the PowerPoint later. So we'll post this whole recording on the YouTube channel in a few hours. Have any applicants received either funding from PPP or EIDL grants in our area at this point?
I don't have that. I don't have that data. I know that no one's received EIDL money. Rose, do you know anybody who's received PPP money?
PPP money?
Yes.
No. You know, I know of a couple who have the application has been accepted, but funding, no, not to date.
Yeah, I do know of some. We do have one member that was approved and signed all the documents for the EIDL loan and has gone through the entire process. And I don't know, Lorraine, are you still here? She was going to stay on in case you guys had questions for her, but she might have.
I am here.
Oh, hi.
Hi, I'm in the garden and I'm not pretty, so I'm going to stay.
Yeah.
I'm going to stay off. But yes, we were approved. Yes, we did receive our documents. Yes, we did sign them. There was a little speed bump because I had applied on March 17th. And that was the loan that was approved, was the one that was the 17th. I also applied on April 1st because another business owner in town said they told her to scrap her application and apply again. So I applied on April 1st and haven't heard a word with the new application. But anyway, back to the old one. I was called by an SBA representative. He went over our gross sales minus our cost of goods, including payroll, and then they loaned us 50% of that amount. So the speed bump was that I printed, signed all the documents, and uploaded the documents because it was the old loan. And my caseworker called yesterday, the same day that I got the documents, a human being who gave me her contact information, which was wonderful, and said that we would need to wait for the originals in the mail and sign them and then upload them in a different manner because the forms have changed since the time that we applied initially. So that has all happened. So we are supposed to see a deposit in our bank account within 3 to 5 days.
Great.
And then what about the grant portion? Was there any conversation of that?
See, the grant wasn't part of that, so I don't know what'll happen there.
Okay,
Because there wasn't a grant at the beginning.
gotcha. Okay, thank you, Lorraine.
So when I heard that this morning on this call, I thought, oh, I need to ask my caseworker about that, because
Absolutely.
clearly we would love to have that.
Yeah, do. And please, Lorraine, keep Kate and the rest of us informed if you
Sure.
do end up getting that grant, how much it is, and
Okay.
that'd be helpful.
Yeah, and
Okay.
you guys, yeah, if you'll keep us in the loop about what actually happens, because I think it's helpful to others to know, like, here's the process and people actually got paid and here's how long it took them to get paid, just to kind of alleviate some of your stress. So if
Right.
you do receive funding, and it's nice to know what the time period is, just so we can share with others.
And I have to say that the process, once our caseworker called us, was literally a matter of 3 days. He called, gathered the information. He called me back the same day, said, this is what you're going to be approved for. We'll send it to the legal department. And the next thing will happen, you will hear from your caseworker. And I mean, literally that all happened. So they're working 6/10s, every single person at the SBA from what I understand. So.
Cool. And then the PPP, I talked to Dylan this morning at Key Bank, and he felt like people that had applied on Saturday should be getting funding like Monday or Tuesday.
Great.
So he's telling people 7 to 10 days once your PPP application is approved.
That's
And I have a friend who applied for it, and he just sent me a text a couple hours ago that said that they received an email saying that, and I'll read it to you guys just for everybody that is applying, so you'll know what to expect. He said that they got an email that said that they had an SBA loan number, and then the funds were on hold. You'll receive DocuSign documents in a few days. The company is still in the verification queue. And they were not allowing them to follow up unless the verifier reaches out to us. So that is the process. And he just told me that this morning, and they applied 2 or 3 days ago. So it's pretty quick. What loan can we apply for if we don't have payroll for employees? We do draws from our account and pay contracted workers, wedding coordinator, yard work. Also, can we get a loan to cover our mortgage on our B&B and wedding facility, and to cover things such as utilities, insurance?
So you can apply for both programs, EIDL and PPP. The one thing that was going to be a little frustrating is you can't use either of those loans for long-term debt, and mortgage is considered a long-term debt. You can use it for the interest on that mortgage as it pertains to your business. If you need a loan for that specific purpose, McKed or your bank through a normal line of credit or lending might be able to do that. That might be a little difficult with your bank right now. So I would steer you to McKed on that one.
So you can pay for your rent, but you can't pay your mortgage.
You can pay rent on leases.
Right. That's what I'm saying. You
Because
can pay
that's-
rent.
Yeah,
but you
because
can't pay
that's
mortgage.
rent for a lease is not a long-term debt for
Right.
you.
Yeah.
But
Makes sense.
a mortgage is. The interest you can pay. But yes, that is the case.
Okay. And then Judy says the Verizon money is focused on women-based business owners.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Good to know. If you applied for the EIDL before March 29th, we suggest you reapply. Oh, that's what Rose said. Hi, Rose. Thank you. Does anyone know who is still accepting applications for PPP? I've tried Columbia, Wells Fargo, and First Interstate, and no one is accepting them, or only accepting them if you're a customer.
Mm.
So I know at Key, for everybody, they got a lot of the Wells Fargo peeps, and you just have to go in and open an account.
Yeah, that
And
was
you have
kind
to
of-
make an appointment. And I believe it slowed. I talked to Dylan this morning. I saw him at 8:30 and he said that it had slowed down significantly. So I don't know if Key wants any more customers, but I do know that they have had a ton of people just open accounts and they're getting the process just as easy for everyone else.
Great.
I applied for the EIDL last Friday. Should I contact my bank also regarding this loan?
No, your bank has nothing to do with the EIDL loan. It's SBA only, and again, it's 3 to 5 weeks, so just be patient. An SBA loan officer will reach out to you.
Yeah. One way to see is to try to log on. If you need to reapply, you will see the beginnings pages. Otherwise, go to your account. Oh, it's what somebody's just saying. If you don't know if you've need to reapply, I guess.
Yeah.
I applied on March 27th and there was no drag and drop, so should be okay.
I'm assuming, yeah, you should be fine.
Okay. Jerry at Houston Highlands just got news our bank is going to do the EIDL loan. So our question in the chat thread just got answered. Okay. What if you have independent contractors and you simply want rent and utilities loan? Seems like both the EIDL and PPP revolves around payroll and employees.
Well, no, the EIDL does not. The EIDL is specifically for operation cost, and you can really use it for anything. And if it's a lease for your business that you're paying rent on, you can use that. And it's also part of the approved cost for your PPP, but not if it's mortgage. So that's an important distinction, rent versus mortgage. And again, it has to pertain to your business. So you can certainly use them both in that respect.
Okay, Matthew again. Sorry, still not satisfied with the answer on home-based business cost. When I calculate my taxes, I count a fraction of my household cost as deductions based on the square footage proportion between personal/business space. Why wouldn't I do this for calculating my non-payroll costs for PPP?
Because that's just how that's the rules they created. I mean, I don't know how else to answer that. The SBA and the federal government created those guidelines. I get that it might not make sense and that a significant portion of your home is for business, but that's just the distinction they made.
Hey guys, just so you know, the chamber does not qualify for the PPP at all because we are a 501c6 and we do everything for the government and they left us out. So there's a lot of things that they are doing that's just the way that it is and there's no explanation. And you know, this is why they're talking about doing a fourth package. They're trying to catch everything that they missed. And so I would suggest that you reach out to your senators and you know, try and your government and in the state government and make a stink on these things because that's how the stuff bubbles up. Yep. They are trying, they're doing their best to catch everything. And so literally this morning I was on the call with the Oregon State Chamber of Commerce and they said, have your people write their senators and for the things that they want. And that would be my suggestion. Okay, Heidi, I am with Matt on this. I can get a home office deduction. So why wouldn't this be included in my cost? It's just not. Yeah. Which of the loans did you say you have to reapply for if done before a certain date?
The EIDL loan, yeah.
Yeah. Can an Airbnb that is not registered as a business apply for the EIDL loan?
Yes, because you can apply as a sole proprietor.
Okay. And that would be, oh yeah, they could go ahead and apply, right?
Yeah, you can apply for either the EIDL or the PPP.
Yeah. My understanding is that if you bring the employees back, you then have to keep them on for an unspecified period after June 30th to still get the forgiveness. But what if there is another shutdown and the 8 weeks is done? How long do you have to keep employees on to get full forgiveness?
I have not seen any clarification on that. As far as I know, I have not seen any ruling to that effect. And of course, I can't speak to what the federal government might do if if the social separation or mandated shutdown continues. That's well beyond my pay grade.
Can you talk about employees who are now out of childcare options? Schools and childcare are closed. What if they want to work for me again, but they have no childcare options?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know how much I can speak to that. I do know that there is provisions allowing employees to deny employment if they have, if they're sick with COVID, if they have family members sick with COVID, or if they're not able to find childcare. So that is one provision that the unemployment has made, recognizing that that's an issue. So it might put you in a tough position and trying to get employees back and trying to get that cost covered under that 8 weeks, especially if you need them. You might have to hire someone else.
Okay, how does it look for staff in regards to total income if we have a little bit of work for them, but not full time at the moment? They do still clear more funds if they go to unemployment, but work hourly on top of that. Yes?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, if you offer them the job, they have to take it or lose their unemployment.
Yeah.
So, but I get there might be some strategy there in terms of how many you bring back. And one thing that might make sense, again, is I would suggest reach out to Workshare. That might be a good program to fill in some of those gaps.
And how are you doing on time? Do you need to?
I've got another 7 minutes.
Okay, 1:30. Okay, we'll go fast. Original direction was to calculate funds based on payroll without Fed taxes, then later advised to include federal taxes. We applied without, which is correct. How do we change the amount after having applied if federal can be included?
You would have to get a modification from your bank.
Okay. And I'm assuming that was for the PPP.
Yeah, I am too.
By the way, I applied for EIDL on April 3rd and got a confirmation letter with an actual confirmation number. That has given me some confidence. However, I have had no response from my 2 banks for the PPP, although last week they both said they would not send out an email to get me up to speed on next steps. Thank you. My bank PPP app only mentions calculating average monthly payroll times 2.5. But I also need to figure in my self-employed amount that you mentioned earlier. Can you recover exactly how to calculate that, and or list the calculation steps in the follow-up?
Well, yeah, basically you will take your if it's self-employed and you're able to track those expenses minus your income minus everything else, you're looking at basically all of your revenue minus your cost of goods sold, minus your other expenses, and then it's again capped at $100,000, and that's the amount that you would use for your particular pay.
Okay. Judy says she read that Miller Beer is $1 million donations for bartenders. Spread the word.
Great.
And then there's a comment to the last one, which was original direction was to calculate funds based on payroll without Fed taxes, then later advised to include federal taxes. We applied without, which is correct. How to be changed the amount after having applied if federal can be included. And then the follow-up was, I mean, like 5-10 hours a week of work for formally full-time.
Yeah, again, if you need to revise your loan in any way, shape, or form, you need to work through your local lender and either get a modification on your loan, or if it hasn't been approved, you may be able to update any information that you might not have included. But if provisions or things change in terms of the ruling moving forward, then you can certainly look to modify that with your local lender.
Does that help you, Jerry?
Where's my
Yeah.
pen?
You're here.
I'm looking at a different screen, but well, it was kind of two separate questions. Like one, when we use Gusto for our payroll services, and so Gusto had an automatic, just like pull the report. It's the COVID-19. It just gives you the report. And then 2 days later, we got an email like, "Oops, just kidding. Actually, you're supposed to use the federal taxes." And we had already applied with Dylan, and the only thing that he just thought that when they call to sort of verify, then you can change your amounts. But I guess my main question is, can federal taxes be included or not? Because it seems like there's a lot of different opinions on that. It really changes our number a lot.
You know, one thing that has been difficult, and where we need to give some people grace, is that a lot of our local lenders are interpreting rules differently, or that even different account managers have different information.
Yeah.
Some of it may be accurate, some of it may not be. It's my understanding, and the information that I'm getting from the U.S. Department of Treasury is that excluded costs are payroll taxes and income taxes.
Okay.
So that's
the last that Dylan had heard, he said that the last he had heard was that state taxes were okay, but not federal.
Yeah.
But then meanwhile, Gusto sent an email to everyone that said, yes, you should include federal taxes. So it's like everyone has a different idea on this, obviously.
Well, I'm going to go with the U.S. Department of Treasury on this one, and their ruling, and as well as, I mean, these are the guidelines that were just put out by SBA.
And they said no federal?
Yes, federal payroll taxes and income taxes. And, you know, maybe things will change. Things have been very, very fluid. So
Yeah.
it's certainly a good idea to keep up on that. Yeah, from what we have heard or not heard, there's been no guidance from the state on what you can or can't include. So if that's the case, you default to include them until you hear otherwise. At least that's what I would do. And as we had talked with Matt, just make sure that you are making note of that on your ledger or in your calculation, that this is what you're doing.
Okay, can I top off that other question that was a little bit confusing too? When I was asking about employees going on unemployment, like I have some full-time employees that right now I'm paying them full salary to basically do nothing, because it seems like the advice is to try to keep them on payroll if possible, go through the PPP. But of course there's articles that come out every day saying like, don't count on the forgiveness happening. It may or may not, etc. So now the last thing I'm getting the impression is, go ahead and lay them off if we're paying them to do nothing. And if I've got 5 to 10 hours a week for you know, this person to do, I guess the big question is like, there's no motivation to work if your unemployment is going to be more than the, you know, if there's no reason to make the hourly. But my impression has been, if like, say they're making $100 in unemployment and you pay them another $100, they're not going to delete it down to zero on the unemployment. They would still make more money getting a little bit of hourly work from us, right?
Again, Jerry, if you offer them a job, they have to take it if they want to. You know, they can't stay on unemployment if they have work available.
Well, I guess my point is that that's not a job, though. 5 hours a week is not a job.
Then you should probably look into work share, because that can help you cover some of those gaps to where you can pay them full time and you don't have to incur those costs. But, you know, there's also, you got to keep in mind the solvency and sustainability of your business. You know, if it makes most sense to lay them off and keep them laid off until you do get the PPP loan, then, you know, that might be what you need to do.
Yeah.
But it sounds like if you do still need some help, just not full time, WorkShare could be a good program for you.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess the question is like, if people are on unemployment, they have to work nothing. They can't even get a couple hours of work. They have to be completely sitting on the couch.
Pretty much. I mean, they can work under the table and not declare it.
Got it. Thank you.
Do you need to go? We got 2 more questions, but
Shoot.
let's see. On the PPP, don't we just use gross pay plus employer pay taxes?
Yes, I mean, you're gonna use, yeah, the.
Whatever
all
your
of your
total,
pay.
whatever your total gross, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, I would like to clarify. It's gross pay minus. You don't take away federal or income or payroll taxes. You just leave the gross pay. Does everyone get that? You do not remove the taxes, payroll taxes or income taxes. That's my understanding when
no,
you're doing your calculations.
no, sorry, then, right now, from what we understand from the US Department of Treasury, payroll taxes and income taxes from the federal government are not included. So
No.
they are,
Wait, this is very, very confusing the way you guys
I
are explaining it.
apologize. So
You gotta
let
go
me go
back to
through.
that fact sheet. It says, do not remove the taxes that you would normally pay for payroll or income when you're getting your gross income for sole proprietorship. Do not remove it. And you times that by 2, the monthly, and then 2.5. So I am not going to remove my federal taxes and payroll taxes. That's how I'm reading it.
What fact sheet are you looking at?
That one that Kate just sent out yesterday, question
Okay.
16.
It's
Well,
the Paycheck Protection Program loans frequently asked questions. And
Yeah.
it came from
You did not.
our buys group on the Daily Digest on not today, but yesterday.
Okay, well, same thing, Matt, as I said last time, just make clear delineation of what you're doing, and your bank will have to verify that. And then I'll work with Kate to get absolute verification on
This
that.
is a very important point that
I
needs
get
to
that.
be clarified.
I get that.
Because it says right here, it says under the act, payroll costs are calculated on a gross basis without regard to not including subtractions or additions based on federal taxes imposed or withheld, such as FICA and income taxes.
Sure.
So
Well, let us verify that, and we'll let you know. And in the meantime, as I had mentioned, just make sure you're being very clear with
Okay.
the.
Well, I'm going to hold off on submitting my application until I hear back from this.
Okay.
So if you can please clarify it and get back to me as soon as possible, because I'd like to submit it.
Understood.
I will, Matt.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's confusing.
I hear you. A lot of this is confusing. We may have to do this again in a couple days, which is fine. We'll do it until we get it figured out, right? Okay, that was the last question. Thank you, guys. And then Rose posted some information about McKed, and they're really great to work with. Appreciate you guys being here. I know this is really tough. It's tough for me too. It's tough for all of us, but thank you, Greg, so much, and Rose, for being here and helping us kind of walk through this stuff. And if you have more questions, let me know. I'm happy to reach out to Greg and try to get them answered for you. And then if you all need more, let me know, and we can schedule whatever it is you think that we need to schedule.
Great. Well, and thank you all. And we'll be able to get verification on that question within hours. So we'll get that to you real soon.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Hang in there.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Kate. Appreciate it.
See you guys later.